Hi everyone, my name is Jackie Dakanai. I'm the Regional Director of Service Culture and Engagement for Fairmont Hotels. Not sure, is anyone familiar with Fairmont Hotels? Raise your hand. Yay, awesome. So you probably know I'm right up the hill from you right now. So, oh, you are? Wow, wonderful, awesome, great. I'm glad we're doing a good job. So if you haven't already, please come visit me up the hill. Um, I've been with Fairmont my longest in my career for 20 years, but over 25 years of experience in HR, essentially. My favorite podcast is actually, it's not crime related. It's called Work Life with Adam Grant. Everyone knows Adam Grant. It's a really great, thought-provoking interviews with a variety of different types of people, and I just love his personality. He's really funny too, right? So the other one I was going to say, again, not crime related, but is it's called Smartless. Is anyone familiar with that one? Oh, yes, exactly. Will Arnett. Again, really funny, but also really interesting to hear their perspectives. So, well, for us, it's looking at the landscape of who we're talking to. So you can imagine in our hotels, majority of the people in the building are line level staff or employees. So it's making sure that our communication has context for our employees. Transparency, very similar. It does not mean to share, you need to share everything, but it's more so, what's in it for the employee? Why does it matter to them? And at the end of the day, how does it affect them? How does it affect their ability to work and put food on the table for their family, essentially? If there isn't any context, then employees won't know what to do with the information at the same time. So it's also providing a framework for this is what you do with the information that I'm going to share. Just to add, again, from an HR perspective, empathy is always something that we teach is really important. And, outside of the content, making sure that it's always guided by our values, our company values is something that also our employees hold us accountable to. And, when we're not following those values, they're really great and quick to point out if they feel like the message is dishonest or, for lack of a better word, someone's bullshitting them. So I think, in addition to the content, there's also the complexity of, making sure that we remember we're talking to human beings and leading with empathy. In San Francisco and California, to add to that. And we're a union hotel. So there is definitely a lot to navigate there. We have a lot of stakeholders. We do have a communications team, I will just add. So we do have someone that does oversee social media, and it's a whole department because of all of those complexities. Training is huge for us. We systematically have training every single year, broadly about communication, but also specific to things like labor negotiations, which for the last few years, you probably know, have been happening every single year. So it's not, fortunately, uncommon for us to do training with people who, which is everyone, may be speaking to the media about those topics and brainstorming how to handle different scenarios, what to say, what you can't say from a legal perspective, but also just tapping into what are you fearful of being asked? And let's rehearse and go through those conversations. In addition to the media, there's also a heightened sensitivity to what people feel they can or can't say to employees in that type of situation, in many situations in general, actually. And the line level staff are a larger population than managers, let's say. So we do focus on training for all of those different scenarios because there are so many different ones. And then when all else fails, we have just a blanketed statement of and teach people to turn it over to our PR director or our executive committee to handle moving forward. But we definitely want to equip people to know how to handle those situations.
The employee, for example, is called out
Yeah, well, I'd say that the process is the same. So whether it's a claim that we receive from a guest about an employee, it's not dissimilar to how we would handle a situation if it was internal, if an employee filed a claim against another employee. It's an investigation, so those steps, thankfully are consistent inside and outside of the hotel. And it's, again, guided by our policies. We hold ourselves to the highest standard, whether it's a guest who potentially violated something or if a guest is claiming that an employee violated something. So, our policies are written, thankfully, for both internal as well as external. And then, of course, we have legal support too, so that's always really helpful. I was just going to add to that, one way to also build trust when time is of the essence is to set up the conversation so that there are actions to leave with that can ideally be followed up on and completed immediately. And so that you have the ability to go back with a follow-up meeting and conversation to say these things have been completed. As an example, our employees are mostly tenured. There's employees that have worked at our hotels for 45 plus years, for example, and they've seen, you can imagine, tons of people come in and out of the building, specifically supervisors and managers. So they, rightfully so, feel entitled to have things get done right away, no matter what the circumstances are, because they're going to be in that building way past anyone that is going to be coming and going. So the expectation is high but fair, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that.
I was just going to say, and when you're in a situation where you're presenting facts and you're presenting data, for example, I think it's important to go back to empathy and putting into context what it means for the people, and then also, simply saying if it's a situation that sucks, that it does suck, and then pointing out positives, but also providing resources for things that they can do and take action to get through it, I think is really important. For us, there are many people who don't have access to technology. So in an ideal world, messages would be delivered in addition to emails being sent and things being posted. In an ideal world, based on the executive committee, they would then disseminate information in person to influencers throughout the building. And that's not the only form of communication. Ideally, there are the town halls. There's we have a text platform that we can use to disseminate information, but also our employees speak countless numbers of different languages. So the reality also is that it needs to be translated, and that doesn't always come across in a very literal way, which is also why the in-person is ideal to give context, because the reality is it could get lost in translation, literally. And again, going back to the people in our building, they do expect to know in advance of this mass message being sent out. So it's often a cascading of information before the formal information comes out. And out of courtesy for people who are going to be affected. And it's unrealistic to be able to get to 100% of people knowing what the communication is, but if we can get to at least 70, 75%, then that's ideal, because then it's a friend of a friend of a friend telling a friend. And it helps to avoid proactively, ideally, people making things up in the absence of information. And that's in an ideal world. Of course, when it's reactive, it's a little bit of a cluster, to be honest. But there's so many different methods that we use just to get to the mass majority, 70, 75%. It's complex. Well, working for a big corporate company, I'm actually trying to break that down a little bit more, because it is very hierarchical in terms of the spoken and unspoken in terms of what can be shared. But from an HR perspective, I feel like in my experience, what is always successful is to share as much information as possible. We don't have a formal tiered system for everything. It is based on, there are policies in place that say you need to communicate to so-and-so at a minimum or whatnot, but I love this question because we have the opposite problem, so I commend you, and I suggest don't change it because in our world, it's awfully hierarchical, and you know, it's almost too hierarchical, and we have the opposite problem where we're trying to break down barriers and share more rather than limiting it to certain positions. So I think it's always going to be, and always has been, difficult to control what's shared, what's not shared. I think it will continue to be that if something negative is shared, that it's addressed, right away. But also, again, going back to this culture of what we share, I feel like at the end of the day, it's a mindset. And for us, we don't share enough about the good work that we do. We don't celebrate enough. We don't share how well people are doing in their careers. So it's creating a culture of let's share this instead of that, and an excitement around let's share all of these positive things rather than maybe some things that don't reflect highly on people. And then it's also just sharing with people, this is the impact if you do and when you do share things as a reflection of where you work. So hopefully there's that critical thinking before people post and share.